Welcome back to Shat on TV, True Detective, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series True Detective. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the King B.
Burritos and tuna salad.
And gentlemen, this is sadly our final watch edition, where we look back on season 3 of True Detective, and the listeners have the last word in a fan mail portion we call The Watch. It's been a lengthy 2 months of watching the show, talking about it every week, exploring listener mail, and finally we are at the end. It is the last ride. Like Roland and Wayne, we are in the squad car for one final cruise down the road. Guys, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like it's that scene where the camera's going around the car and we see Roland and Hayes, like they age and then they get younger again. That's what this trip has been like. I think it was a good season. We worried about it coming in and going out. I'm happy with where the series went. I'm 100% back on board. Just a little worried, though, about the ratings and the critical response that we've seen, whether or not we're going to get a season 4. But I'm surprised. I thought the last episode was great and it would be universally loved, but there's been some question out there. What do you guys think of the overall take of the critics at large?
People that I've talked to seem to have not seen it yet. That's mostly the feedback that I'm getting. Is people like, was it good? Is it worth watching? And there's still people a little gun shy from season 2. So I think that this is going to be kind of like season 1 was, not immediately recognized for what it is, but as time goes on, people will circle back to it. Especially after Game of Thrones, there will be kind of a lull in TV, and I think that's an opportunity to go back and explore this. You know, I think that the people who have watched it overwhelmingly are being positive about it. And we will have some email later during the watch that kind of explores both sides of this. So I'm glad to see that it wasn't for everybody, but the people who were kind of diehard True Detective people really did like it.
Yeah, you know, I had premonised after watching the first 2 episodes that we were going to get a return to form for season 1, and I think they really delivered. I don't really feel I need to have another season right away. I know that there's some rumblings about whether or not it'll get renewed. I think it would be great to give Pizzolatto time to create something a little bit more sturdy and well-rounded, like he had the chance to this time around. Something that can run, you know, once things like Game of Thrones have run their course, or, the Deadwood movie comes out, something that's coming out in between sort of when their big budget A-list shows are running.
Part of the reason why season 2 fell so flat was the rush to get it out on screen. When season 1 was a hit, they signed the contract for 1 and 2 together. They turned right around and started writing. Now, this time around with season 3, he was forced to take a step back, took an extra year. I'm completely fine if HBO takes its time, don't rush season 4, give Pizzolatto some time to breathe, to create a new story that's worth it. Because in the end, that's the most important thing to keep the series going. And I don't think that HBO cares. You know, the season 1, I think it averaged about 2.3 million. Then it went to 2.6. And then we were down into the 1.3. So it's half the audience of 2. But if you can create 1 every 3 or 4 years with A-list quality actors, it could be must-see TV, and with HBO's new push to create more content, I think it would be that perfect accessory to the bigger, like, cornerstone series that they'll always be known for.
I think one of the big factors might be what happens to Steven Dorff after this. You know, that guy came out of left field and really put on a huge performance, and that's got to up his profile. Maybe we're going to start seeing him in more projects. You might see things like this show as sort of a proving ground for guys that are looking to get back into the game and maybe show they've got some serious chops.
If they do a season 4 of True Detective, which again, note that hasn't been discussed yet. I mean, it's not official. It's looking like HBO tends to announce that sort of thing in July during their press period in the summer. So if it does happen, we probably won't know about it until July. And then it's very unlikely that anything would be released by this time next year, though. So you're really looking at like 2021 at the earliest for anything to come out. And I think that lines up with what you guys are saying, is it gives Pizzolatto a little bit of time to work. There's no pressure to do it, and the fact that it hasn't been approved or greenlighted. So it could be the sort of thing where it's several years down the road. But one of the interesting rumors I've seen that are going around is part of the reason why he weaved season 1 back into season 3 is that season 4, if there is one, could be a sequel to season 1. It may not be a direct sequel in the sense that it's Rust and Marty out there following up on the crime still, but rather kind of like The Wire, where the story expands a layer up. So you start out with this one case and it moves up into the bigger issue of a child kidnapping ring or some sort of organization, and a takedown from that level. So it'd be interesting. Would you guys want to see a sequel or something completely new?
I've had my fill of child abduction or child sex rings. Give me something new. Just good actors, good story. It doesn't need to always be about that.
Season 1 was about, this abduction of children and these murders of these young women. Season 2 wasn't really about that. Season 2, I mean, there was a sexual element to it, but it wasn't any sort of abduction thing. It was more of like the, illegal trade related to that. And then season 3, there's really no sexual element to the crime at all. So, I mean, they've been distinctly different crimes throughout, I think, just due to the dark nature. We've kind of lumped them all together into this sort of creepy, abducting children for weird, perverse purposes. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing just a new, different crime. I don't really feel I need to return to Rust and Coal.
I think the danger there is I don't want to go back to LA. So maybe something completely different. But there is a lot of opportunity. Maybe go to the Pacific Northwest. Nothing's really going on there lately.
I'd like to see what's going on in Yuma, Arizona.
That actually would not be bad.
I mean, maybe there's tons of financial crimes. I mean, season 2 had, mass transportation, as one of the cornerstone crimes. And it was a lot of financial crimes. I think that could be very exciting. Carrie Gross might do the show then.
Yeah, True Accounting or something like that.
Yeah. True Embezzlement. Dun, dun.
So, guys, I think we've talked season 3 to death here, but there is a lot of great listener mail that came in over the last week and a half. We've rounded up the best of the best. Again, as a reminder to the listeners, just because an email didn't make it here doesn't mean that people didn't write in. There's much, much more on the site, shatontv.com. Go to the watch. You can read all of the emails in entirety. Some of these we have trimmed down for length, but they are some new and old people that we've heard from before the season and completely new voices. And we're going to start off with one of our favorites from this season, the guy with the master theory, Joe in California. He called in, if you remember, mid-season with his monotone delivery and talked about his entire world that he built that we all bought into. And he's got a follow-up email for us. Joe writes, "It was a shock and pleasure to hear the voicemail I left for you played on the podcast. At the time I called, I was home with a severe cold, hopped up on some seriously strong cold medicine. My monotone delivery has generated a lot of laughs in my household, and I'm regularly ridiculed for it by my kids. I must say that I really connected with this season. I'm not a cop, but I've been both a prosecutor and a defense attorney. I'm very familiar with criminal cases and investigations. 3 years ago, I moved my parents close to me. My father has dementia, and he is often confused and suffers from memory and time loss. Like Wayne, my father was a LERP in Vietnam, serving with the Army's 101st Airborne. Also, like the creator of the show, I grew up in a rural area, Nebraska. Tragedies and violence in small towns create an atmosphere of dread that no one living through it ever seems to forget. Strangely, season 2 also hit close to home as I worked on a case where the local politicians of a small municipality in Los Angeles County were alleged to have been deeply involved with organized crime. I love the podcast. I started listening to you with American Gods, Taboo, and Westworld. I'm on board with Shat for Game of Thrones and season 2 of American Gods. Keep up the good work, Joe."
Yeah, Joe, your voicemail was probably my favorite message that we got throughout this run. As I probably listened to it 4 or 5 times the first time I heard it, and I just thought, man, I could sit with this guy and talk about TV all day long. You really did create a complete and realized world, and had the show run the way you had mapped out, I think I'd have loved it all the same.
Yeah, Joe, shout out to your father. I respect that. I was 101st as well. One of the things that the show does so well is that it grounds the characters in the story, that people throughout the country and a lot of people who grew up in rural environments, they can feel connected to the characters. And that's genuinely what brings us back. It isn't the crime. It isn't breaking the case. It's the relationship of two partners over the span of 30 years. Continue to do that, and this show will be a hit. It will relate to people. And thank you very much for that voice message. It was a classic. And if you ever want to send in a voice message of you like talking to your kids that way, or maybe reading a book, something, we'd love to play that again, or send it in for a movie. It was very soothing.
If you just want to send an audio file that I can use for my GPS, that'd be great. too. But Joe, it's amazing how many parallels this show had with your life. It makes sense now that you could kind of map out an alternative storyline for this, because it's like the Vietnam connection, the rural area connection, the fact that you were a prosecutor and defense attorney. You get how all this work, and I think that really speaks to the quality of the show, that this world was created that you can connect with.
I'm picturing Joe giving like that his closing argument of the case. I think it's very important that we remember this defendant. He's a cold-blooded killer. Cold-blooded killer. He murdered that poor girl. If he tried to give his closing arguments in that same method, I don't know how successful he would have been, and maybe that's why he used to be a prosecutor.
All right, thanks, Joe, for your voicemail, and we hope to see you for American Gods. Next up, we have Jeff H. Guys, I enjoyed your deep dive on episode 8 and was glad the three of you could point out so many strengths to the season and episode. I, however, did not enjoy the finale, but not because I did not appreciate the ending of the story. It's because I found the episode itself to be poorly done. I'm glad they did not go child pedo conspiracy, and I'm glad they did not try to recreate a violent confrontation as in season 1. In the end, this was a story about family and loss. Wayne actually finding his daughter at Julie's house instead of Julie illustrates this poetically. But the rest of the episode was tedious. The Hoyt-Wayne convo was a letdown, with neither of them admitting what they know. The Mr. June conversation was a big exposition dump. The multiple Wayne and Amelia conversations felt like first drafts of dialogue without any subtext or style. I know you guys enjoyed it, but I'm curious if you see yourself rewatching the season or the finale at any point. Good story or not, I don't think the episode was enjoyable enough to have rewatchability. Enjoyed your pod thoroughly this season, Jeff H.
I think the Hoyt-Wayne conversation was, I really liked it. And I thought that's why you got Michael Rooker. So like an actor who could carry that. In that real situation, those two guys are feeling each other out. It would have been a big pissing match like that, where you're subtly threatening the other person. And that seemed genuine. Yes, the exposition dump was a bit much, and they needed to just tie up all the loose ends, and you couldn't do that in an hour and 20 minutes. But your point is well taken. As much as I enjoyed it, and I thought it was a good emotional closure to the season, I don't know that I would go back and rewatch the whole season, but that's not going to be the measuring stick for whether or not it's quality television, because there's a lot of shows that I love that I wouldn't go back and watch.
If you're thinking about starting a podcast, don't. It's not fun. It is a lot of work, and I do less work than any of these other guys. And much like Wayne Hayes, I'm really excited to sit back, run through this whole season and not talk about my feelings about it. Because ultimately, I feel like after a while, you examine something so closely, you review it and run your thoughts through it so much, it just kind of takes away from the enjoyment. So I am looking forward to giving it a little room to breathe and kicking back on the couch on a Saturday and just running through the whole season without having to think about how I'm going to respond to it.
Thanks for your email, Jeff H. We have another critic of season 3's finale. This one comes from Rob. Can I remind you guys that this is true detective, not true love or true life? If the story's mystery is a MacGuffin, then we all wasted a lot of tinfoil over the last 7 episodes. I agree with your assessment of episode 8 if we were watching a Hallmark movie. Everything you guys hate about poor script writing, contrived characters, and convenient answers is encapsulated in this episode. What the fuck? The only mystery left to solve is why are you kissing pizzolatos in HBO's ass? Keep up the good work. Please stay off the drugs when watching the shows you're about to review. Still love your podcast, Rob.
Okay, I don't think we're kissing anybody's ass. Maybe we can chalk up a lot of us just doting over the show was that we were expecting it to go off the rails and just a complete dumpster fire, and that we were pleasantly surprised. So yes, maybe in a little bit of time we won't look at it so glowingly, but I can't change the fact that I enjoyed it. All you can ever get from us is 100% honesty and being genuine. If I didn't like it, we'd shit on it. We've shit on plenty of shows regardless of what people think.
Speaking of shitting on things, be sure and tune in for our American Gods podcast that's going to be coming up soon.
We're keeping an open mind as we go into it to see what they do. But yeah, we are always, as Big D said, 100% honest. We have no reason to kiss HBO's ass. As Roger Roper would tell you, for the right price, we will. But that price has not been close to met yet.
As far as kissing HBO's ass, I mean, they are the Michael Jordan of entertainment television. Nobody else has brought us shows that rival them.
I would say nobody else has brought us shows that rival them, but they've, in my book at least, had a bit of a drought lately. I would say that Game of Thrones last season was subpar. I would say that True Detective was good, not great. And I'm still waiting to have them blow me away. Again, I'm comparing this to things I've seen like The Wire, Deadwood, The Leftovers, Game of Thrones seasons 1 through 4. I think we are past the golden age of TV, but that's for another podcast.
I don't know. I think that they're trying new and different things. Right now, you can catch High Maintenance in its, I believe, 3rd season, which is, I think, a phenomenal show. I was really surprised at how good Crashing is. It's a nice comedy. And Barry has just been off the rails amazing. I loved Barry, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
Thanks, Rob, for your email to the watch. Next up, we have JC. JC wrote in before about how we're always blowing deadlines because I missed one. JC writes in, "Hey guys, I was surprised you chose to read and respond to my email last week, but thanks for doing so. I appreciate the apology from Gene." He put my name in quotes for some reason. "And understand that juggling multiple priorities and deliverables, especially while traveling, can be challenging to say the least. That acknowledged, I was again disappointed that you totally missed the second part of my original message concerning that look between Harrison James and Roland during the barn beatdown scene. By the time this message reaches you, the final episode will already have aired, so I'm pretty sure you will know why Roland and James had that momentary look between them. My guess is that it was for one of two reasons. Roland was either in on the original plan with Hoyt and company and was aware that James had planted the backpack and clothing, or James and Roland had some sort of prior in-the-closet rendezvous of which he could also spill the beans to Hayes if Roland didn't put an end to the beating. In turn, either of those reasons could have been additional impetus for Roland to take out James before he disclosed the secret. Anyway, might be kind of a moot point by the time this reaches you, but it will be interesting to see if either of my hypotheses meet out. Once again, keep up the great work, and I look forward to your next airing Wednesday night. JC."
Okay, I gotta love the fact that JC, he planted that fucking crazy flag right in the ground. He didn't just put in slightly, he just boom, slammed it down. He knew at this point we were gonna tell whether or not he was right or wrong. JC, you were wrong on both of those. No in the closet affair. Nothing else went on there. So I think that was great. I like the way you came strong with that take, no matter how wrong it was. To defend Gene, there's one thing that listeners don't take into account for is the time zones. I'm in the East Coast, and there's a lot of times that we're going back and forth with scheduling. If Gene puts it out at like 10 o'clock on Tuesday, to him, it's on time. Everybody on the East Coast is like, shit, where the hell is it? So a lot of that falls into where people are, because usually all the complaints we get are from the East Coast and the Eastern time zone. So maybe we got to get Gene to be a little more sympathetic to the needs of the people in the East.
All right. Thanks, JC. And I apologize again. Next up, we have a whopper of a watch email from LJ O'Neill. And normally I would never read anything this long, but there is so much in this email, and it's really worth a listen. So hold on to your butts. O'Neill writes, "Some thoughts for what they're worth on the True Detective Season 3 finale and overall. First, the acting was often spectacularly good. The scene in which Roland comes to love dogs is one of the best things I've seen on TV. Wayne was superb, Hoyt effectively threatening, Watts sincere, if a little off-kilter in the end. In almost 40 years in law enforcement and prosecution, I've never seen a person, even those who clearly want to be caught and punished, actually say that they want to be punished. Amelia was mostly very good, but a little let down by the writing in the big exposition scene. Good solid acting in the smaller roles as well." Okay, so he's broken it down into the good, the bad, and the worse. I'm assuming it's a he. The good. In addition to the acting, lots of little details. For instance, the nun in the finale was the same person as the girl Amelia talks to in episode 6, the one who says Amelia should write about what happens to girls here. Not only the same mark on the face by her left eye, but the same actress and character name as revealed in closed captioning. Mike's daughter is Lucy, Julie's mother's name, which is revealed before the reveal that she's also Julie's daughter, even if we said aha at the time, which indicates that Julie has successfully recovered her past. Wayne's name tag in their intermediate scene between 1990 and 2015, in that timeline when he's at the university, shows that he is the head of campus security for the University of Arkansas. Okay, so big reveals there. The bad, The big exposition scene itself, with the ghost of 1980 Amelia explaining everything, seems clumsy and forced. Yes, I get the whole metaphor thing, and that Wayne may be using her apparition as a device to introduce his own real thinking to his perhaps befuddled mind. Yes, I get the metaphysical thing with the constant references to time throughout the season. Even with that realization, it was sort of cringe-inducing. 1980 Amelia, explicating 1990, 1995, and later events. If there is no supernatural in the season, per Mr. Nick, it isn't even then internally consistent as metaphor or device. It's just so damn convenient. Like they were running short on time and need to get a whole lot of exposition out there quick. Or, as my spouse noted, maybe they just thought the viewers were too stupid to figure it out for themselves. Now on to the worst. A major plot point is based on an impossibility. When Hoyt very effectively threatens Wayne with exposure as a killer, and more significantly, with harm to Wayne's family and to Julie, a major aspect of the threat was that Harris James Beeper had a computer chip with GPS, and they could go to the spot of its location before it went dead, and perhaps need to take fucking shovels. That technology did not exist in 1990. First, beepers were receiving devices only in 1990. The first two-way beepers did not exist, as I recall, until the very late 1990s, and even those did not continually transmit. The user needed to type a message and initiate the transmission. In short, Hoyt's threat is a complete anachronism. There was no such GPS capability in 1990 and could not have even been used as an effective threat. Some other errors in the show, and maybe they're just a lack of attention to detail. Wayne's timeline is not possible. He could not have been a cop for 12 years in November 1980 and been a LARP in the 75th Infantry, which was not organized until February 1969. Although he could have been a LARP before that, since the 75th incorporated into one unit LARPs who had been previously attached to other regiments. And LARPs did not operate solo, as Roland said and as the final scene implies, but in small patrols. LARP is an acronym for Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol. In 1990, the investigators could not have gotten records on Lucy's death from the Clark County sheriffs. Although there was a sheriff, he was the head of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and had been since the merger of Las Vegas City Police Department and the Clark County Sheriff's Office. And Nevada Bell would not have provided Lucy's telephone records since it provided telephone service to Reno and the rural area. All of the Las Vegas metropolitan area, which included the Strip, got telephone service from what was then Centel. Although the ending was not completely satisfying, the season as a whole was first rate. Best wishes, LJ O'Neill.
Okay, so the good and the bad, I really liked. I thought it was a strong take. Then when you got to the worst, and you said the major point was based on an impossibility, I asked Gene before we hit record on that review. I said, dude, did the beepers, because I had a beeper for when I was in the 101st, and I said, for alerts, I said, do they have GPS? He claimed he looked it up and said they did. But regardless, you're saying that plot point was based on improbability or impossibility. Hoyt was there bluffing Wayne. It doesn't matter if the technology existed. Wayne wouldn't have known if it existed or not. His bluff was based in partial fact. There's cameras surrounding the facility. They saw Haynes and Roland staking him out, following him out there. So then you just need to drop that. Plus, we know where he is. Do we need to go look in the woods? It was a bluff. The rest of those, though, with the phone companies and the sheriff's department, we need a fucking researcher. We need to sign you up to the podcast.
Big D did ask me about that. And my logic was cell phones existed. And actually the origins of GPS go all the way back to Sputnik. So I thought for sure some advanced GPS or some advanced beepers that have GPS on them. I was sadly mistaken. All right, next up, we got one from Kenny P. So Kenny P is writing about the season as a whole. This was never truly about any crime. This was larger message about how tragedies, grief, and our past hold us captive. Much like Julie or whatever she's calling herself, it wasn't until she killed her former self that she was able to break free from true captivity. After all, it appears in the present day she had family and stability. I had already seen people mentioning the jungle ending, possibly saying it's a dream or him dying, and that's crazy talk. A few episodes ago, we get Amelia reading a book, The Jungle Book. Hopefully everyone knows the story and symbolism here. Bagheera, born in captivity, had never seen the jungle. He was a man's plaything. Much like Julie after his mother's death, he realized he was strong enough and he freed himself from captivity and went into the jungle. So, with that known, we can say that jungle scene at the end was Wayne finally freeing himself from captivity, his memories, his past, etc., and returning to his real home in the jungle, now a free man, releasing himself of the chains of past burden. Now, it's purposely ambiguous, but a lot of different interpretations can be made, and it's whatever you make of it. I'd say one thing it's not is his afterlife or a fever dream. What makes it so wonderful is that a ton of interpretations work, and most of them are not incorrect. Except if you think he's dead, lol, or it was just a dream. That's from Kenny P, aka Kenny Dukeman.
So, Kenny, I agree with you 100%. I thought the ending's ambiguity left people to interpret it how they wanted. I think it's just surprising that people still go to that lost ending of a fever dream or purgatory or death. Would anybody ever have the the cojones to ever do that again?
I mean, Lost did it after Jacob's Ladder, so...
if that ever happens again, I would be truly shocked. More than any other ending a show could ever do.
There's a show called Life on Mars that was also ended as a dream sequence, and that was probably within the last 10 years.
People would storm HBO's offices with pitchforks. And can you imagine the rage on Twitter if Lost happened today? That people had invested that many hours, and then the producer and the creator of the show goes back to what they promised they would never do. It would be just riots in the streets of Twitter.
Tom in Chicago has a different take. He writes in, guys, we got a great end to a great season. Sometimes a soft and subdued ending is better than a hardcore guns are blazing type ending. I think that the finale really focused on family. Hoyt, in his warped way, all he wanted to do was help his daughter and did so in the only way he could by throwing money at the problem. Wayne finally realized he's a lucky guy with a great family. I think his epiphany came when he saw Julie having a good family life. Roland, in a way, he gets a substitute family in his reconnection with Wayne. Julie, she gets the family life she never had growing up. Also, HBO, please give us the Wayne and Roland Unsolved Mysteries show. It has to have each episode with them having a senior special at Denny's with appropriate breaks during the day to watch reruns of Matlock and Murder, She Wrote. Finally, thanks, guys, for all your hard work. It was great to travel on this journey with you. Best, Tom from Chicago.
Tom, thank you very much for joining us on this journey. And I second that. I want a Wayne and Roland Seniors Unsolved Mysteries, or, the elderly detectives. Their chemistry is undoubtedly fantastic. I think that would be a show I would definitely watch.
Yeah, I immediately pictured the Wayne and Roland arguing over what they had for breakfast that morning. That's the unsolved mystery.
I agree with all of it except for Wayne realizing he's a lucky guy with a great family. I have a much more dour take on the way this all goes for him. I think he has a moment of resignation. I think that moment where he's on the porch and he has the pupil flashback to the bar scene with Amelia. I think that this is a homecoming of an ending where everyone ends up together and there's a companionship, but I don't see it as Wayne going, wow, everything really worked out. I'm one lucky guy with a great family.
Maybe Wayne's problem is that he could never let anything go. And that always put the mystery in this case ahead of his family. He could never get past it. In that way, the disease was actually a blessing. The disease that forced him to lose those memories was the only reason he could get by it and enjoy that little time left on the porch, his daughter, his grandkids, his family. That helped him get to this resolution at the end. It wasn't his own making. It was the disease.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Next up, we have Tasmin Yu, a repeat writer, who says, this ending was so heartwarming and bittersweet, especially with Hayes forgetting when he arrived at Julie's place. But it was probably better in the long run because Julie found her peace in the end, and having Hayes come to bring her past trauma would have been painful. Plus, for Hayes, he can rest easy now because likely in his subconscious, he knows he solved the case, even if he forgot. When he did have a moment of recollection when he was drinking water, I think it didn't stay for long. West finally having a family and people to spend time with after so long was also great. Also, the ending with him being in the jungle is very aptly put and great symbolism. Time being a flat circle and all, but also now him succumbing to his mind and dimension now that there's nothing holding him back. Anyway, thanks for the great show. I'm looking forward to your Game of Thrones podcast. P.S. For those mad about the ending, you have only yourselves to blame with your increasingly complicated conspiracies. This season was much more about characters, their relationships, and memories. And that comes from Tasmin Yu.
Yeah, thanks for writing. I really agree with you. I think that this whole thing was really ultimately about these men and how they were kind of dealing with the aspects of their lives that set them apart from others. And in the end, they all do get kind of a little bit of resolution that they need.
And Tasman, just a reminder, you don't have to wait all the way until Game of Thrones to hear us on this podcast. We're also doing American Gods again. Season 2 starts this week. We'll have a season 2 preview coming out this week. So tune in and subscribe.
We also do movies from the 80s and 90s. Shat the Movies. We got 100 movies, back catalog. Follow us there.
Yeah, so shatthemovies.com, shatontv.com. Stick with us until Game of Thrones comes around. It's only 6 seasons. It's only 6 episodes, so you got to do something else. All right, next up we have one from Michael Wolf, who also goes on Twitter as Snarky Desad. Michael Wolf writes in, I listened to a few True Detective 3 podcasts, and nobody picked up on what I thought was a pretty clear allegory to Wayne's death. In the second to last scene, Amelia more or less came to fetch him with some dialogue that could be interpreted in a few ways, and they disappear into the white door together. This sort of expands the last scene's meaning. Maybe Wayne disappearing into the jungle is his cosmic penance, either purgatory or hell. Or maybe that's Wayne's heaven to forever be on the hunt. Anywho, great show. Thank you. And that's Michael Snarky Desad Wolf of Chicago. I was a bit confused by this, Michael, personally, because I thought the ending would be Amelia taking him into the light. But I'm like, wait, is this a flashback scene of something that actually happened between them? Or is it him dying? Or is it a combination of the two, him recollecting a scene that is his idea of going into heaven? But I think the jungle scene actually cemented it for me in saying that wasn't the case. This isn't an afterlife vision, as Big D pointed out. So I don't know if I agree with it. But again, as Kenny P said, it's really open to interpretation. And it's interesting to see how different people took it. All right. Thanks, Snarky. Up next, we have one from Helena Vissing. Helena writes, when Hayes finally finds Julie, his dementia ruins it all with a blackout. But this leads to the final scene of him connecting with Becca in the car. All the focus on Julie throughout the season, all the fixation on this lost white girl Hayes never even knew, it was a displacement of his real feelings about his relationship with his own daughter. That's what this story has been about all along. Father-daughter relationships are hard, especially from traumatized veterans. We know all about Wayne's struggles in his marriage, so it's safe to assume he also struggled in his relationship with his daughter. We see her while she was little, and Wayne's panic attack about losing her, and then she disappears from the show until that little glimpse in episode 7. It's because when she became a teenager, it really stirred up things for Hayes. It pushed all his buttons that his little baby girl became a woman, and he likely withdrew and didn't know how to handle it. He was so afraid of losing her when she was a little girl, as all parents are. The fear of your child getting hurt is greater than anything. So he almost lost her emotionally when she became a teenager. That's why he asks her, adult Becca, in the car, if he lost her. The feel good we get is that he didn't lose her. She's still there, but it was probably close at one point. We think the whole story was about Julie Purcell, but it was really about Becca and a father's relationship with his daughter. Pizzolatto clearly has a big place in his heart for the archetypal father-daughter relationship. Many psychoanalytic Jungian theories address this, and the father-daughter relationship, as well as the mother-son relationship, strikes the core of struggles as human beings. And as a side note, what's missing is really Amelia's relationship to Henry. Best, Helena Vissing, Sci-D.
So for the long time, we thought that something had happened between Wayne and his daughter, that their relationship, that they were estranged, that she wasn't coming back home because something had happened. Whether it was with, the presumed death of Amelia or something else. But in the end, I think it's clear she has become distant out of her inability to deal with his illness. From all intent, everything that we could see was he was an attentive father. He had some issues he was dealing with, but she could not deal with that part. And his confusion, did I lose you? I don't think was physical. It was more emotional. Did I push you away? He didn't remember what had happened. But yes, as somebody who has a daughter, all those little moments hit me. I did give my daughter a little extra tight hug, and so yeah, I think it was a fantastic way to end the season with them at least getting some resolution and coming together as a family. But how long that'll last, I think he will only get worse from there, and the pain that would cause her, I don't know how you continue to be around that.
I wonder what it says about people, how they would interpret the ending of this show. I appreciate you writing in, and it's certainly an interesting take, but I think sometimes a show about a child murder kidnap mystery is simply a show about a child kidnap murder mystery.
Helena, listen, you have the degree. I don't. I have nowhere near your level of education, and so I do bow down with all due respect. And I don't necessarily disagree, but sometimes it is tempting. Like this email is definitely from an academic in the sense that there is that extra layer of analysis that most people don't do, and so you got to really look at the author and go, is he doing it too? Now, clearly, Becca is alluded to throughout the season, and Pizzolatto chose to have this scene, so it means something. But is it the whole point? I don't know. What I'd love to do is have a poll and ask, everybody, who viewed the show, is that what you got from this? And I think that people who are parents and women probably got that. And, childless guys like me and the King Bee had no idea what you're talking about. But thank you so much for your insight. And please keep writing in. I was fascinated by this email. All right. Next up, we have one from Jason. Jason writes in, I enjoyed season 3 of True Detective. I feel like this is the best of the show. The acting by the 4 main characters has been off the charts. Mahershala Ali, Carmen Ejogo, Stephen Dorff, and Scoot McNairy just killed it. I like the writing on the show. Nick P might be a pompous genius, but he did this show right. I really enjoy the finale. I also believe the way it was portrayed deliberately left open endings. This is what life is. There are really no neatly tied up bow endings. Life does not stop and leave us all to live happily ever after in a pink castle with a princess, a queen, and a knight. What happened to Amelia? We don't know, and neither does Wayne. It dissipated in one of his memory fogs. Was Roland gay, or did he just have a fascination with strays and helping them? Tom was a stray. So was Wayne. Roland ultimately considered himself a stray. Recall one of the opening scenes when Roland wanted to kill the fox or bobcat or whatever it was. Wayne would not let him. I believe when Wayne is at Julie's house near the end, there's a slight gleam of recognition. However, Wayne will not tell. Thanks, and keep up the good work, Jason Weichman.
I would say that season 3 is probably a little bit more complex than the first season. The entirety of the first season is really the 2 actors carrying the entire show. It's about these 2 men and how they're interacting with each other and the task at hand. The larger cast and everyone's performance in this show, the slightly more complicated crime that they're trying to solve, I would say that this was probably in a way, a larger, greater undertaking. And as a result, you've got more skill set on the bench to work with here.
I like what Jason said here about Wayne at Julie's house with that gleam of recognition. I caught that from the acting in this scene that he's not entirely lost there. I think he's his mind is functioning enough to understand that he is where he is, and he makes a conscious decision to let it go. I don't think it's just his brain is completely shut down, that his dementia is so intense that he doesn't know where he is. He intentionally walks away from it.
I'll take it even a quick step further. I think there was an acknowledgement between both of them. We now believe that Julie she's decoded. She's unraveled her past. And she, naming her daughter after her mother, her late mother, was the sign of that. She has to know who Hayes is. And there's that momentary look where both of them remember the past and kind of an acknowledgement of a thank you. And then it's gone in that next split second. And I think that's a beautiful way to end it.
Yeah, I was watching the episode with Carrie Gross, and she's like, does she recognize him? I go, does she recognize the detective who is searching for her? She probably does. And it's not every day that a guy pulls up to your house, a black man who looks exactly like the detective that's been looking for you for 2 decades or 3 decades. I think she was very aware of who he was.
And it adds even another layer to that tension to where when she sees him walk up, she doesn't know, is he there to expose her, to bring her back into the public light? So she says, can I help you? And he says, yeah, I'm kind of lost. So she's, lets her guard back down. And there's that moment where she can kind of relax. There's so many layers to the show and so many layers to the onion. I think if we watch it another time, like we said, we wouldn't, or I wouldn't, I think we might even find more there to like.
Now, listener Rusty from Shelby County, Alabama, wrote in with a different take on all the open questions. Rusty writes, it was okay, but it still left me with a lot of questions. Maybe these were answered and I totally missed it. But did Hoyt get away with everything? His only consequence was no heirs to inherit that mansion, so it fell into disrepair. Why did Nikki P provide answers to the wrong questions? How did cousin Dan end up in the quarry? What was the resolution to the Hoyt and Hayes conversation in the woods? Answer, some stray mongrel comforted Roland in his self-destructive bar brawl, and that's how he ended out in the woods with all them dogs. Dude, that wasn't the question. How did Amelia die? What happened in the Hayes marriage between 90 and 2015? Answer, they got jobs at the University of Arkansas. Oh yeah, and the last scene of the season reminds us that they got married in 80. Dude, again, not answering the right questions. Most importantly, is King B some kind of a deadbeat? Did he ever PayPal that dollar to Gene on the Mexico baby bet? For those listening at home, his balance is $901, and we're forced to wonder if he'll owe Gene over $1,000 by the end of 2019. So many questions from Rusty in Shelby County, Alabama.
This is the sound of a crisp $1 bill. Suck an egg, pal.
Yeah, in King B's defense, he also brought me a burrito, 2 tacos, and some promised tuna salad that never arrived.
I'm keeping that tuna salad for myself. It's just too good to share.
But to get to your questions earlier, let's do a quick rundown here for Rusty. I'll tackle how did Cousin Dan end up in the quarry? He was killed, probably. You've got Hoyt making, I would say, more than veiled threats about if people chase down this line of going after Julie, bad things will happen. If they leave it alone, bad things will not happen. And I think that Cousin Dan fell on the wrong end of that line, and that's how he ended up in the quarry. Someone killed him.
Okay, I'm going to tackle the Hoyt component that you said, whatever happened with that conversation in the woods. We know what came out of it because he never told Roland. He decided to back off to protect his family. You know, and also, you said he got away with it. Nothing else happened. That man has lived in misery since the moment his daughter got into that car accident.
I believe it was Arkansas.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, I think Hoyt has lived in misery since the second that his daughter got into that car accident. So no, he did not get away with anything. He doesn't care about his heirs. He has nothing. It's not about the money. It's about the family. He has nothing left.
Also, with what happened in the Hayes marriage between 1990 and 2015, it fell apart.
No. Why? Why do you think that? I think it lasted. I think it was good. They were in a happy place. He had a good job. He was not a detective. He walked by the room. She was reading her book. She was teaching a college class. There was a loving acknowledgement. We know that his relationship with the daughter was not estranged. His relationship with his son is good. What makes you think it was bad?
Wait, so when he goes and looks at her at the University of Arkansas, they're together still?
Yes.
Do you recall in our earlier email, he's got a name tag. He's the head of security at the university.
Yeah, I get that. It doesn't mean the marriage is going well. I thought it was like he just goes to look at her from time to time.
So you think he just randomly got a job there to stalk her? You don't think he would have called the police? No, she's probably teaching there. She said, hey, why don't you get a job at the university? They both have a fulfilling job that doesn't have a case that comes between them or define their relationship.
Oh my God, that's so much nicer.
Yeah, I took it their relationship went really well.
Yeah.
And that's why the family is still cohesive and together. He just doesn't remember it.
Yeah, that's way too neat an ending, guys.
Shut up.
I don't like it anymore.
She still gets sick and dies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so now she got sick and died?
Yeah, it's cancer. That's what I think. Cancer.
You know, fuck it. Rusty's right. Too many questions left unanswered. All right. And finally, we end with the most prolific writer of the season, maybe next to Kenny P. It's our friend from the Dana Buckler Show, Ash Schlafly, with an email titled, "The End is the Beginning is the End." And Ashley writes, "Hello, gentlemen of Shat. I want to say first and foremost, I was wrong. I was so damn wrong this whole season, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. That finale absolutely blew me away, and it made my complaining throughout the season seem silly. Please take this email as my official retraction for all the complaints from earlier. Perhaps True Detective is a series that has to be seen in its entirety. When it is beautiful. In my final email to you, 8 in total for 8 episodes, I wanted to offer what I'd like to offer most of all, some literary analysis.
Ooh, gotta go.
Episode 8 sees us return to an older Amelia's classroom, and yet again we hear her reading from a poem. This one is a rather famous one, Delmore Schwartz's Calmly We Walk Through This April's Day. Schwartz's poem is all about the daily mundane aspects of life that trick us into thinking that time isn't passing, that we have so much of it left, when really in the end, we are burning in the fire that is time, an all-consuming fire that takes us down and turns us to ash before we are ready, before we know it is coming. In essence, thanks to time, we live in a great shadow of foreboding, our own demise, but we either choose to remain unaware of such fire or allow ourselves to be consumed by it because we have no choice." Schwartz asks one thing in this poem that I think is so crucial to Wayne's story. He writes, "What will become of you and me?" Wayne has been struggling with that all season as he is unaware of what came before, much less what will become after. Thus, when Wayne asks the question, it changes from what will become to what became of you and me. The season tried to answer that, tried to let us know what had happened and to bring him to the end, to bring he, Amelia, and their children to the point where we find them in 2015. He didn't know. We didn't either. But what a beautiful journey to discover together. In truth, that is the power of season 3. It isn't a whodunit, but who are we? Or for Wayne, who am I? I think that we got the answer to that, and we got that amazing scene with Julie where he forgets, and I argue remembers and chooses to forget again. The point, we find out, isn't the Purcell case. The lesson isn't that we get a happy ending. Instead, Pizzolatto is telling us and reminding us through Wayne that we get an ending, whether we like that ending or not. And it is up to us to deal with what we are dealt as best we can before the fire truly consumes us. Again, time is a fire in which we burn. How nice it's been to burn alongside you three this season in analysis, theorizing, and viewing. Until American Gods, Ash Schlafly.
There's times where Ashley makes me feel like I need to do some more reading. I don't ever feel stupid, but she takes it to another layer where I wish I was a little better well-read.
What I love about Ash is that she'll do that, and then like she'll be like, "I'm at Mardi Gras, y'all." Okay, what? Ash, you wrote this really brilliantly written line in the second graph, I believe, of your watch email, in which you said people fall into two camps: either people who choose to remain unaware of the fire, or who are consumed by it because they have no choice. And on a personal level, this has plagued me my entire life in the sense that I have a go rate that's insane, and I'm wearing myself out constantly. I don't like to sleep. I don't like to take breaks. I don't like to leave a minute unscheduled because I'm constantly of the mind that I'm dying. Keep going. I cannot calmly walk through this April's day. And so it's fascinating to see how different characters in this season react to that impetus. And also the fact that this poem is so prominently featured and I didn't really pick up on it until you analyze it for us. I really appreciate that. And with regards to being wrong about this season before it was over, this is one of the difficult things about these weekly shows is that some shows are really well built for that format. I think that, for instance, Game of Thrones is great for that. You can have these episodes that are standalone pieces, almost like small movies, and they have a reasonable arc and a conclusion. Maybe you set up some sort of a conflict, and by the end of the episode, you get some sort of resolution to that. But shows like Westworld and shows like True Detective, when you watch one episode as a standalone, it can be somewhat unsatisfying or confusing. But I went back and watched Westworld season 2, which I didn't really care for a ton when we watched it week to week. And if you watch it as a whole, the things play together a lot better than you'd think. There's a continuity there. And True Detective, I think, also falls into that category. And my best evidence for that is when we saw episodes 1 and 2 together. That's how the show started out, right? Remember, they were released together. And it felt so much more complete and so much more fluid. And I think that these episodes are meant to be paired or stacked together in triplets to really give you total story arcs.
I think a lot of our more educated listeners who write in with very complex emails and deep critiques of what they think may be happening and then find out that they were wrong throughout. It's never made me more thankful for my complete lack of formal education. I think that sometimes you educated types just look too deep and you don't need to have all the answers, that maybe it's just better to sit back and take it in and kind of assess everything after the fact. I, unlike Gene, never schedule any of my day. And the reason for that is I also feel like I'm dying. So what's the fucking point?
Well, I think right now between the four of us, the three of us on the podcast and Ash, we span the spectrum of our audience, and that's why we do so well. We have all the way from King B to Ashley, and hopefully everybody out there listening is somewhere in between. Not that King B are at the bottom, but you're at the everyman, is what you said.
I'd say on the flip side, though, the King B has seen about 100 times more movies than I have, if not 1,000.
I will say that I've learned more in this world from chasing cheap women than I could from any textbook.
All right, Charles Bukowski. We hear you. Kids, do not study literature or the humanities when you're in college. It will fucking ruin storytelling for you because everything that you read, you're like, oh, okay, they're just playing on X. Usually the Bible. sometimes Greek tragedies. It's dissatisfying. Anyway, thanks, Ashley, so much for your email. And that wraps it up, guys. That is The Watch and the end of True Detective Season 3 coverage. Again, if a Season 4 comes along, I'm sure we'll be here to do it with you. But until then, hop over to our American Gods podcast. It's just called American Gods. And subscribe to that. Follow along with us. It's only 8 episodes. It's going to be a nice appetizer for Game of Thrones. And that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV True Detective. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. Our email is hosts@shatontv.com, where you can write in with your closing thoughts on True Detective. We'll still read those and reply. And also write to us about American Gods, Game of Thrones, whatever else is on your mind. Wherever our fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can donate through PayPal, Venmo, or Amazon. Just go to shatontv.com/PayPal/Venmo or /Amazon. And if you'd like to help us with sponsorships, just go to shatontv.com/survey, fill out that form, and it'll help us connect with sponsors that you'd like to hear about. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, the King Bee, and Carrie Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on American Gods starting this week through Shat on TV Podcasts.